How's it going, guys? There's been a lot of discussion and questions on the online forums and on YouTube also on what the difference is between the 450 and the 350s, and then also which one's better. I've recently had a 2020 F350, a 2021 F450, and then my dad's also got a 2019 F350. So I wanted to dig into that today, help you guys out. I'm going to get into what the specific differences is between the 450s and 350s, the pros and cons of each, and then also I'll let you know which one I think's best. If you guys find this video helpful, make sure you hit that subscribe button and check out the links down in the description. There's a lot of stuff I dropped on there all the time that I update regularly that'll save you guys money on stuff for your trucks, and it'll also help the channel out. So the 450, the biggest difference between the 450 and the 350 is the 450's got the wide track front axle, so that allows you to turn the wheel. It's substantially tighter. I had my 350 first, and I remember when I got my 450, there's a particular place I pull out of where I used to work where you had to like kind of judge the way you turn to miss the curb. And I remember when I pulled out of there in the 450 the day after I traded for my 350 in on that, how much less or how much more I was able to turn at 450. Steering wheel turns, I was probably able to get another turn and a half at least out of the steering wheel. So that's one scenario where it's better, is just driving around town, especially with a trailer. If you get people to pull up past the white line and stuff, it's a big difference. But the big advantage for me is I have a 44-foot fifth wheel toy hauler. And if we get in a campground after everyone else is already in there, sometimes it can be tight getting in and out. So the 450 is really nice for backing in and out of places with big trailers. Another big difference between the 350 and the 450 is the 350, you have different options for power and gear ratios. So the 350, you can get a gas engine. For the 2023 models, you can get a 6.8, a 7.3 gas. And then you also got the option for both the regular diesel and the high output diesel. In the 450 retail truck, what I mean by that is non-cabin chassis, you can only get diesel engines. They don't offer it with a gasoline engine. With the cabin chassis, you can get a 7.3. They do come with both the regular diesel and the high output, but there's no option for gasoline at all. Another, like I mentioned before, the 450, every 450 you get has 430 gear ratios, whereas the 350s, you can get 355, 410s with diesels, and then you can also get 430s if you get a gasoline engine in the 350. This is one part that's actually a little misguiding when it comes between the 450 and the 350. So the 350 and the 450 actually have the identical rear suspension, rear axle, everything. The only thing different in the rear is actually the braking system. Now the front on the 450, that wide track axle is rated, I think it's like at 75 or 7,600 pounds, whereas the 350 is like rated at 6,000. So you got like a 1,500 pound higher capacity on the 450 front axle. But if you're pulling gooseneck or fifth wheel, you can actually haul more with the 350 over the 450. And the reason for that is that on a pickup truck, your gross vehicle weight rating for both of them, 350 and 450, we're going to just call them crew cabs, is 14,000 pounds. But the 450 weighs more than the 350, so that's where that comes into to factor. You actually can haul 500 pounds more with a 350 versus a 450. Another major difference between the two, the 450s come explicitly with commercial tires, like really heavy sidewall tires. And this is a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because they last a lot longer. Like I'm talking, there's been some reports of guys getting 80,000 miles. I've gotten like 60,000 out of ours. But there's some reports of guys getting like 80,000 miles out of these commercial tires versus a regular pickup truck tire. You're lucky to get 50,000 miles out of it. But the downside is they cost a lot more. And whenever you first get the tires put on, in that period, like 5,000 miles, you'll notice that the trucks will wander over the road. I really notice this a lot in construction zones. And then like if you're on a real flat area, like down in Florida, Georgia, where it's flat and you're on long roads were just flat and you come across a spot where there's like a low spot in the road, it'll literally just grab you and like shoot you off the road. So you kind of got to be on edge and looking out for them spots till the tires wear in. But for whatever reason, it's not as bad loaded if you're towing something like my fifth wheel as it is empty. And the heavier trailer you pull, the less noticeable it is also. So if you're pulling like a little tag along, you're going to notice it a lot more than if you're pulling a big fifth wheel camper. And then with that, there's less choices of tires with the 450 being commercial. There's only, that I know of, there's only like 12 or 14 different tires you can get versus the 350 have standard tires, like 17-inch tires on them. So you can get, there's a bunch of aftermarket tires you can get for that. So the last thing different mechanically between the two is the 450 has a lot bigger brakes. And I will say that I switched from a 450 back to a 1-ton here recently. And I noticed that immediately when we hooked up to our fifth wheel loaded, the truck doesn't stop nearly as good as it did with the 450. And they're supposed to last a lot longer. I never got that far when we had our 450 to know, but when I get my new truck, I'm gonna keep this one for a while, and then we'll see how long these brakes last. There's two other things to consider that's not really set in stone, that I can't say one definitively is different than the other, but it's two things to consider. One's the fuel mileage. Like I said, the 450s only have 430 gear ratios. So if you think about it, 430 gear ratios should have a little bit worse fuel mileage than say like a 410. But the caveat is that the tires on the 450s are a little bit taller. So the fuel mileage I realize between the trucks is pretty much all really close to one another. The only one I did notice a big difference on is the 350 single rear wheel. But like when I did this video, I was kind of just comparing dually to dually 350 to 450 to just regular 450. So that's kind of negligible because, like I said, the 350 dually versus the 450 dually pretty much gets the same fuel mileage. And if you haven't checked out any of our fuel mileage videos we did on the 450, be sure to check them out. There's links to them in our channel bio, and then I'll drop a couple links down in the description also to those videos. And then the last major consideration between the two is insurance. Depending on the state you live in, some states I've heard, I can't say this for sure because my state's not like this, but some states I've heard that require the 450 to have commercial insurance. I'm not really sure why, because like I said, the 350 and the 450 both have the same GVWR, but there's been rumors of this. I will say whenever we got the 450 versus my 350, we had to switch insurance companies because my broker said our insurance was going up, and I never did ask him why, but I'm guessing that's why, is my old company was going to switch me into commercial policy. So that's something to just consider. Make sure before you buy it, you run it past your broker and at least get a price for insurance, and then ask them if it is going to go up, why, and if it is because of commercial, shop around different companies, or ask your agent to shop around to different companies if they're a broker, to try and find a company that'll insure it as personal, because there are, like I'm in Pennsylvania, there's companies in Pennsylvania that will insure it as personal or commercial, but there's other companies that will just explicitly, they'll only insure it as commercial, and there's other companies that won't insure it at all because they only do personal. So if you can't get coverage, or if they're going to bump you up to a much higher rate, or if you know they're going to bump you up to commercial, shop around and try and find somewhere that'll put you on a personal policy, because there's a good chance you can't find one. There's people that say that you can only get in commercial insurance, and that's the furthest from the truth. Now, like I said, that may be true in some states, but in Pennsylvania, that's definitely not the fact, and I know in a lot of states that's not the fact. So now that I kind of gave you an overview, I'm going to get into the pros and cons of each, and then I'm going to give you my opinion on which one's better at the end of the video. So the pros, we'll start with the 450. The pros of the 450, the tires, they do last. They last, like I said, I've heard as many as 2 to 3 times as much as regular tires. Like this truck I have now, I went through a set of tires, and this is a 350, or it's actually a Ram 3500, but I went through a set of tires and 15,000 miles. Now they were cheap tires, but like I said, there's commercial tires on these 450s that I know guys are getting up 80,000 miles. So that's something to keep in mind, but also be aware that the tires last 2 times as long, but they're a lot more expensive too. Like they're probably like 40 to 50% more. And if you get a good quality tire, it's probably honestly cheaper if you're going to run the tire through its whole life to run them commercial tires. But if you're just going to keep switching tires all the time, it's probably going to add up over time because the commercial tires, like I said, are like 40 to 50% more. Another big thing, like I said, is the brakes. The brakes on the 450 to the 350, just it's not comparable at all. It's just the 450 definitely stops way quicker. I never had my brakes get hot at all on my 450. Where on my original single rear wheel and this 3500 Ram, I've gotten off the interstate after pulling a trailer and stopping, and you could smell your brakes like getting fuel or something. Now they weren't real hot, but you could smell they were hot. And then another thing, if you're looking at the 450, yeah, the 430 might suck a little bit more fuel, the 430 gear ratios, but they pull really good. Like I remember when we got our toy hauler, we was coming out of Florida. We just crossed the state line. I think that's into Virginia, the big hill coming out of North Carolina. And I was able to run 70, 75 the whole way up that hill, never got pulled down. And it's just like unlimited power. And it's a big difference between my dad has a 350 with 410s in it. Now his only has a 6-speed, but you can feel the extra power. And like I said, the biggest pro of the 450, the reason most people buy it, is the turning radius. And it sounds stupid, and it sounds like, oh, that's nothing until you actually drive it and you're like, oh wow, that's great. Like it's even when I bought this Ram, I traded that 450 on a Ram when the prices went out of when the Ford prices went up. I ended up trading my 450 in to try and make a little bit of money on it. When I pull out a lot, the first thing I noticed was how far out in the middle of the street I made when I had to turn. Whenever I made the turn, I was clear across the yellow line, where my 450 I would have been right up against the curb. It's substantially better. Now the cons of the 450, like I said, with them 430s, you're kind of stuck at them, and because of that versus the 410s, especially the 355s, but maybe even the 410s a little bit, you might notice a little bit better in fuel mileage. But honestly, it's not. If you're towing trailers all the time, you're not going to notice any different. But if you are driving around empty, you might notice a little bit difference in fuel mileage. But if it's a dually, it's not significant. And then, like I mentioned, the tires, until they're broken, like at 5,000 miles, they like to wander over the road. So that's something you just need to know before you buy it, that it's something you're going to have to deal with. There's some tires that guys are running. I forget the model number, but it's a Michelin tire. I never did get around to buying them for our old truck because they didn't wear out. But supposedly it doesn't do that. Yeah, but they were just switching out the front tires and noticing a difference. And there were some guys that were switching out all 6, but even if you just switch out them front 2, if that really bothers you, it definitely addresses a problem, I've heard. And then, like I mentioned, another con is the insurance. Just shop around for insurance before you commit to buying a truck, just to make sure you are in one of them goofy states that require commercial insurance. And like I said, if your broker or agent says, oh, we can't do that, go out on your own and shop around if you really want the truck, because a lot of times these guys work off commission and they don't really tell you the straight facts. So you may, like I know in Pennsylvania, I've heard of people saying that you got to have commercial insurance for that truck, and that's far from the truth. So that be aware that's going on also. And then another con with the 450s, when you first buy it, depending on what package and trim and stuff you get, plan on spending like an extra $3,000 to $5,000 up front. But realize with that, you get the wider front end, heavier front axle, and then you also get the bigger brakes too. So it's a trade-off, what you're paying for. But keep in mind, they hold the resale value also. So like for instance, right now, you know how crazy these truck prices are. You can probably get let's just say a limited F350 for like $100,000. A limited 450, you're talking 110 to 115,000 right now. On the used market, just because people value the 450s more than the 350s. Then the 350 Pros, like I said, there's a bunch of different power options. You can get gas, diesel. The 2023s, you can get 6.8, 7.3 gasoline, and then you can get both the regular diesel and the high output diesel. As I mentioned, they might be slightly better on fuel. Then you got the 3 different gear ratio options too, depending on what you pick engine wise. But you can get, depending on what you get, 430s, 410s, or 355s. And then also looking, like I said, the insurance may be a little bit cheaper. If you do got to go from, if you are in a place where you have to go from personal to commercial, you're talking a pretty substantial savings. But if you're in a regular, like Pennsylvania, where you can shop around and get it, it's not that big of a deal. And the biggest pro to the 350 is you can't haul that extra 500 pounds gooseneck because of the extra weight of the 450s. So that's something to keep in mind. So the con of the 350 is you can't get a 430 with a diesel, so you're going to lose some of that pulling power on the hill. And then the last con I could say for the 350 is the brakes and the turning radius. You're really going to miss that turning radius, like I said, but it's one of them things you don't know until you've driven it, what I'm talking about. And then the braking power is also a lot better on the 450s versus the 350s. So the part you've been waiting for, what's my favorite and what would I recommend? Well, I can tell you, we ordered a 23 and it's definitely going to be a 450. And the reason for me is, like I said, the insurance is kind of out for me. It's irrelevant because Pennsylvania rates it on weight, and they're both 14,000 pounds, so it doesn't really matter. Actually, so it basically boils down to fuel mileage, and like I mentioned, it's pretty much negligible, especially because we spend about half of our miles towing. And the turning radius and the brakes just makes it worth it for us. We do so much trailer towing. We got so many big trailers. It's worth it for us. But that's a decision you need to make. But hands down, my favorite truck's the 450. Out of all of them, leaving the GMs and the Rams, I've had all 3 of them now, and I like the F450. That's my favorite pickup truck. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of our future videos.